Okay, hello, welcome to the last part, I think, of this video walkthrough. So right now we have compromised the credentials of domain user. Okay, we don't know exactly his privileges so far. Of course we know that he's an administrator to the mail server, so he might have more interesting privileges out there. But in any case, it's worth seeing a bit here the cycle, the chain of attacking Active Directory. So currently we have the compromised creds, and we want to perform this cyclical procedure here until we compromise some domain admin creds. So right now we will try to perform lateral movement and move through various users and computers. Of course, in this lab we just have two computers, and the one is the mail server we've already compromised. But in a real life engagement, what Active Directory is actually about is moving laterally by abusing some common misconfigurations you will find. Okay, so right now we have passed this step. We had the initial foothold to the domain because we had the Peter.Turner credentials, and we have to move to the post-compromised domain enumeration. Now, since we don't have a shell in a Windows machine, we will have to perform that step with Linux tools, and specifically the InPacket, CrackMapExec, Bloodhound, these nice tools that we have used and we keep using all of the time. So let's go here. Okay. I have a problem remembering IP addresses. Okay, let's go here and input the right parameters. Okay, it's this password here. And let's allow Python to do its magic. Okay, hopefully it won't take long. We can see that it's trying to connect to the LDAP server. It has found some interesting stuff so far. 14 users, that's good. Alright, groups, computers, operational units. Let's also open this directory because we want to import it here in Bloodhound. Let's see. Okay, it will finish soon. Didn't we use the zip flag? Okay. Cool. So we have everything neatly packed here. We're going to import it right here. Nice. Let's go and mark Peter Turner as an owned user. And let's refresh our database and see what we have here. Okay, so we should try and find all domain admins. Edward Miller is one. Let's mark him as a high value target. We don't have any domain trust, so we could enumerate. Let's see if we can find Kerberos double accounts. Oh, we have only this. As for prostable, nothing. But also let's place that as a compromised computer. Okay, usually it's very useful to mark everything that you have already pawned here as owned, because it will be included in shortest paths, and if you don't add them you might miss important stuff. Okay, so we can see we have shortest path to no lapse. Okay, obviously the mail server, it's a Linux server, it does not utilize lapse. We can find Windows Remote Management users, SQL admin rights, should we have servers that host SQL databases. And now let's try to find shortest paths to high value targets. Let's see if we can find something. Okay, it's quite dense here. Let's try to move them apart. We don't have an owned entity right here, which could lead us somewhere. Let's try to find shortest paths from owned principals. And again, we don't have anything. Now, right here, we don't see anything interesting. Let's go to our user again, see if he has any outbound object control. He doesn't. Okay, and we should check with our compromised mail server. See, we have any sort of outbound control rights? No. Here again, no outbound execution rights, no outbound object control. Okay, so right now we don't have anything particularly useful here in Bloodhound. So we should go back here and check what we have so far. Okay, now you remember that we found something interesting earlier on in the opt directory that we downloaded from the network file share. Okay, we found a certs directory which contained two nice certificates. Okay, so obviously we should check here, since we haven't found any other interesting paths. We should obviously check if the domain controller has Active Directory certificate services running on it. Okay, now we can do it with certify.exe, but we don't have any access to a compromised domain joined Windows machine, so we'll have to do it with Linux tools, and there's a very nice tool called Certify. Sometimes it's not that fast and good, but it's really useful in situations like this where we don't have a foothold in a Windows domain joined machine. So there are various arguments here. Each argument corresponds to a specific action, and it has its own options and parameters that we can find with the help option. The first thing that we should do is try and find any vulnerable any certificates related vulnerabilities. Okay, so it shows us the syntax here, and let's try to enumerate it. So let's say DC IP address, which is this right here. we'll need a username. As you can see, it requires the domain as well here. Let's define the password here. Let's see what else can we. Okay, let's set the vulnerable and enabled options here. And what else should we set? Okay, and let's set the old Bloodhound option as well, because we're not going to use the custom Bloodhound version by the creator of this tool. And let's see if it runs. Okay, it's running. It has collected some interesting stuff for us. So it's trying to get the certificate authority configuration, and it has produced a file for us. And right now we can use it and import it to Bloodhound. Okay. Now, what's really important here is that this data in the default Bloodhound version is actually pretty useless. Okay, you need to import the custom queries that have been created by Ly4k, the creator of this tool, to and import those custom queries here to find domain escalation via certificates and PKI. So if you don't import those custom queries, which you can find easily by googling them, you won't be able to make much use of this data. So let's find misconfigured certificate templates according to the privilege escalation vector 1. So if we go here, we can see ADCS abuses. Okay, Hacktrick has a nice article, and so does Hacker Recipes, and you can see here that it has these exact escalation techniques. They all derive from the certified pre-owned white paper created to initially showcase these privilege escalation vectors. So we can list here, and we see that we have two vulnerable certificates here. Okay, we have the sub-CA, which is the sub-certificate authority, all right, the subordinate certification authority, and we have the hybrid computers. So these are vulnerable because we have the enrollee supplies subject here. So what we can essentially do is to request to use a vulnerable certificate template, okay, and this vulnerable certificate template is overly permissive. It allows us to grant certificate enrollment to low privilege user, and the low privilege user is able to supply the enrollee supplied subject. So what we can do is actually impersonate a user via a certificate template and be able to gain access to the domain as this high privileged user that we want to impersonate. Okay, so right now we have two vulnerable certificates. They're already marked as high value. Okay, this is important here. And let's see now, we have chosen these hybrid computers here, and let's see if we have any anything that we could actually utilize to I mean, if we have an owned entity, an owned user or computer or group or something that we could use to abuse this overly permissive template. So if we go here and once more, let's show, I wanted to use this, but we can also see that here. Okay, let's say from own principles. No. Okay, it doesn't show here, but it shows right here. Okay, we can see that we have compromised mail01. Of course, mail01 is a member of the domain computers, and the domain computers can enroll in this vulnerable template. Okay, if we go here as well, we can see from the group delegated object control that we are able to enroll in this vulnerable certificate as a member of the domain computers. Now, if I use the peter.turner user account, I'm sorry, I can see the certificates that Peter, the templates that Peter can enroll, but unfortunately none of them are vulnerable. Okay, if we check them one by one, none of them are vulnerable. Okay, so we cannot supply the subject here. Okay, so Peter.Turner is pretty useless for us. We used him to enumerate the domain, but in order to escalate our privileges, we will actually need to use the compromised computer. Okay, now as you remember, or you should know, each domain computer has an account itself. Okay, so it usually comes with a $sign in the end, so the SAM account name is this. So we can actually use this computer to escalate our privileges through the vulnerable hybrid computers template. But before we do that, we need to find the NTLM hash of that specific machine. And that's one of the very interesting parts, apart from abusing certificate templates, which we are going to see in the next video.